here, where General Motors, Dow Chemical, as I mentioned, Raytheon, Grumman, Boeing, TRW, effectively by now have become part of the government. And this is a somewhat complex thing to explain, but basically they're so interlocked that a senator's fortune is going to be tied to whether or not they have manufacturing military plants in their state and in their district, which means that if they're afraid of losing that plant, then they can be told how to vote. So if a senator says, well, I'm not fond of this defense appropriations bill you've got coming through, and the contractors really want it, they're like, Raytheon says, we need that bloody bill, and we need to sign this particular line 3000, because some of these bills are massively long. I mean, they're thousands and thousands of lines long. And it's thousands of lines that basically has to be looked at by lawyers, right? Most senators and congressmen, by their own congresspeople, by their own admission, don't read the bills because they're too long. It's like reading the end user license agreement, the EULA, of iTunes or iMusic or whatever it is. You just like click agree. It's like, yeah, you do it. So that's basically what people do. So the defense establishment says we want to have line 3023 specifically left in because it's going to be good for us in terms of tax when it comes to tax time. And so Senator Bob in state, whatever it is, says, okay, to Raytheon, we'll make that happen. And when the thing comes up, Senator Bob votes the right way. If he doesn't vote the right way, Raytheon says to him, we warned you, so now we're going to withdraw our plant for the next, in the next 2 years. And you're going to lose 2,000 jobs in Maine town X, plus all the families. We're talking about 2,000 families of people now. So 2,000 individuals, plus another, say, 5 individuals that's going to go with each of those. So 10,000 individuals are going to be displaced. And we'll move back in when we elect your successor. But you're done for us because you're not voting our way. And there are various different ways of signaling this and doing this. Some of it's overt, some of it's covert, and so on. But it's often called the military-industrial congressional complex because basically the Congress is in there. It's the same thing, really. So this is what Eisenhower was talking about. So if you have a look at, if you had to look at, so I'm a big fan of Helen Caldecott, and I will talk about her later at greater length. But in her book, The New Nuclear Danger, which she wrote and then revised in 2003, she revised it since then. And I'll quote here now from her. She says, under the banner, business are us, the Pentagon. So the Pentagon is the main, the headquarters for all the militaries, right? The Pentagon hosts a paper on their website proclaiming that they are America's largest company. The next being Exxon, with a budget of $165 billion, with 5.1 million employees. The Pentagon is the nation's largest employer. So who owns you? The Pentagon does, right? It maintains, so there are more people working for the Pentagon than there are working as teachers, let's say. Remember we said apparently children's education was important? No. It maintains 600 fixed facilities nationwide with more than 40,000 properties and 18 million acres of land. So this is a major industry. It stations employees in 130 countries out of 178 in the world. This number has changed. It's now, I think, 153 countries that they're stationed in. The number of countries in the world shifts because countries get absorbed, and little countries get absorbed and sort of then create themselves and go independent and so on. America is a nation that spends only 6 cents out of every dollar on educating its children and 4 cents on health care for every 50 cents it spends on the military-industrial complex. Overall, the Pentagon's $310 billion per year, it's really, that's 17 years ago, $310 billion now. It's like that's, oh man, that's what they're spending every quarter. Dwarfs the $44.5 billion for the education department. So $310 billion, this was in 2003, all right? $310 billion for the military, $44 billion for education. Okay, so less than a sixth of the budget. And $20 billion for the National Institutes of Health. Well, you would think that, as we've seen, you might want to beef that up a little bit, right? Globally, the annual military expenditure stands at $780 billion. So this is everybody. Like if you put all the military budgets together in the world, you would at this point get $780 billion. We think now the global budget is between $1 and $2 trillion a year. It's hard to get these numbers. It's hard to solidify these numbers, as you can imagine. The total amount required. Okay, so now have a look at this next slide, which is a bit of a thing. Okay, so what would it look like if we took, say, 1 year's military budget, which of course the military would just scream and cry that they, oh my God, we can't do without this money for a year. It's like, okay, let's just imagine that we just put all the spending for weapons on hold. Like, go on paying, you want to pay people, okay. I don't know what the salaries would cost, but you know that the salary is going to be the least part of the money, right? Because they're not paying soldiers a lot of money. They're not paying office workers a lot of money. It's just a job, right? Okay, it's steady work, but okay, if we took the money that the Pentagon spends in a year, what could we do? Well, have a look. We could provide global health care. Okay, that's good. And by this, Caldecott means for everybody. It doesn't mean like just for Americans or for well-to-do Americans or white Americans. Eliminate starvation and malnutrition. She means worldwide. Provide clean water and shelter for all. Remove landmines. Eliminate nuclear weapons. Stop deforestation. Prevent global warming. Prevent ozone depletion and acid rain. Retire all debt for developing nations. Obviously, developing nations, we can't use that phrase anymore, but that's, so that's why I have to put it in scare quotes. So you just say to people, nations that are in trouble, like, say, Venezuela, you're in debt? No, you're not. That's it. We wiped it clean. Prevent soil erosion worldwide, which is obviously massively important in terms of keeping the forests and so on. Produce safe, clean energy, stop overpopulation, end illiteracy worldwide. If you spent the money to do all that stuff, it would cost $273 billion. And you would have left over $542 billion. So you could still buy all the shit you wanted in the defense industry with that, except for, of course, for $237 billion. So what do we value, right? This is what it is to have a military-industrial complex, and that is what Caldecott's point is. Okay, so Vonnegut is working against this. Now, everybody at the time knew this stuff, and it had become popularized, partly because of a book by Seymour Melman, who was an economist, political economist, who wrote a book called, A True War Economy, a permanent war economy, that's it. And also the Pentagon, there's a book that has the Pentagon title of the Pentagon in it. I will find it for you. And so people read them. They were like, look at this, holy, they knew it was bad, but they didn't realize it was this bad. It was bad, right? Okay, so Vonnegut says on page 19, I have told my children not to work for companies which make massacre machinery and to express contempt for people who think we need machinery like that. This is ironic, of course, because Vonnegut's own brother, Bernard Vonnegut, is a very big scientist and invents cloud seeding, which is part of the same, effectively becomes part of the same military-industrial complex that Vonnegut attacks. And he talks about going to the New York World's Fair, which is like Expo. I don't know if you've seen an Expo. I think Expo is supposed to be in Tokyo this year. Good luck with that, right? But we had Expo 67, and we had Expo 86. I can't remember when they were at the next expo, but the World's Fair, New York World's Fair, same thing. And we saw what the past had been like according to the Ford Motor Car Company and Walt Disney, and what the future would be like according to General Motors, right? And I asked myself about the present, how wide it was, how deep it was, and how much of it was mine to keep on page 18. And this is somebody who is basically coming face to face with whether or not his children, who are at this point about to become adults, basically, are going to have a world to inherit. And obviously, this is even more on our minds now, some 50 years later. This past has been controlled by people who industrialized America, Ford, and mediated how that story went, Disney, right? And the future is being handled by global marketplaces under GE, which will now be GM, which will now be IBM, Xerox, Mitsubishi, and all the global multinational brands which have since come to light and which have withstood the test of time, basically, but are also have their hands in everything. It's not as though Coca-Cola is just making Coca-Cola, right? They also own half the food and drug, or half the food world worldwide, and the farms, and so on, right? So this is what it is to come to terms with, to come face to face with these industries. That's why I wanted you to pay attention or to have heard this stuff. You have to have heard it at least once in your life.